All right, East African microgrid solar project. This country's primarily subsistence farming and they need a hospital. This system has 3 sources of power. 122 kilowatt solar array facing north because we're south of the equator. Feeds 5 SMA, 25 kilowatt tri-powers. These are fed into a 300 amp AC combiner panel. That's the first source of power and the preferred source of power. The second source of power, East African electrical grid at 30 kV, step down, 3-phase, 230, 400 volts AC, 50 hertz. Third source of power is a 210 kilowatt generator. All 3 sources of power feed in to this microgrid, 210 kilowatt generator and the electrical grid. Both feed into this 400 amp ATS. It has contactors to allow it to switch between the utility and the generator. They feed onto this microgrid. So the preference of power, the solar feeds onto this microgrid. The ATS and the generator feed onto this ATS, and the utility feed onto this microgrid. When there's excess power beyond what's being consumed at the hospital, they feed onto this 90 kilowatt SMA battery inverter system. Wired as, with the inverters wired as 5 clusters of 3 connected to 5 48 volt battery banks. Each battery bank is 2,104 amp hours at 20-hour discharge. 2,104 times 5 is 10,520. 10,520 times 48 volts. This battery bank is able to hold 504,000 kilowatt hours of capacity. These inverters are able to take this, one for each phase. They're able to take the AC and convert it to DC for charging. They're able to take the DC and convert it back to AC and feed back onto the grid. Microgrid, solar, utility, batteries, all feeding onto this microgrid and out. Through a manual bypass and through a manual transfer bypass to a 400 amp made load panel, a 200 amp non-essential load panel. This load shedding contactor disengages if the batteries get below 50%. The essential load panel is able to feed the operating room, neonatal, water purification, everything the hospital needs for this, including residents. It's a hospital, and that is how a microgrid project interconnected to what is an intermittent utility